Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your pharaoh of physical media, your chancellor of cheerfulness, and lest we not forget, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And apparently, I am Robcasting at you from the Robservatory, and this, my friends, is Robservations episode number 486. Maybe someone's a little quick on that trigger finger trying to get rid of me. Huh? Yeah, that was crazy. But here I am. You can't keep a good man down. That's what I like to say. So, as many of you know, yesterday, my stream was struck right after it went off the air, after I stopped broadcasting, Robcasting. I was hit with a takedown notice. Actually, it was a copyright notice. It wasn't a copyright strike, so it wasn't a pox or a mark against my channel, but my stream was blocked worldwide by CBS. I disputed that, and they upheld it today. As a matter of fact, I will read you what I got from CBS today. We are in receipt of your dispute of CBS copy. Oh, by the way, this came from CBS Legal's Online Enforcement Division. That's where I got the CBS Online Enforcement Division. That's where it came from. We're in receipt of your dispute of CBS's copyright claim in the YouTube Content ID. The 3 scripts for the miniseries Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 are copyrighted works owned by CBS Studios. Now, this is interesting because the scripts don't say Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 on them. They just say SETI Alpha 5, a Star Trek adventure. So Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 must be how they were copywritten. And that copyright notice did not appear on the scripts that I had. Whether or not the works are unpublished or unmade. In your video examining Nicholas Meyer's proposed 3-part SETI Alpha 5 miniseries, Robservations Season 2, number 485, you read from the scripts and revealed characters and plot lines infringing the rights of CBS. Well, I didn't really read from the scripts. I was kind of paraphrasing. We request that you edit your video to excise summaries of excerpts from the scripts or elements of the unpublished Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 work before reposting the video. In addition, the scripts are confidential and subject to non-disclosure confidentiality agreements, the disclosure of which is detrimental to CBS. Nothing in this email should be construed as a waiver or relinquishment of any right or remedy of CBS Studios, Inc. or any affiliated party, all of which are expressly reserved. Sincerely yours, CBS Legal Online Enforcement. Now, that's interesting because when I've received other takedown notices or blocks, YouTube blocks, I did not get a letter like this. Maybe it's because I disputed it and they told me what was going on. Now, to be honest, if I thought that this was going into production or was going to get made, I wouldn't have covered it. You know, I wouldn't have covered it only because, in the case of Dune, which I did cover, and in the case of the Duel of the Fates script, which I broke that story, the Duel of the Fates script was never getting made, and Dune is based on a book. So it's not like there's any shocking revelations, and after reading the Dune script, I was like, this is a really good script, and it's a terrific adaptation of the book. It wasn't like, the Duel of the Fates script was ever going to get made, and Dune was already known. Now, I honestly believed, like I believed with Star Trek The Beginning, that script was never going to get made. I mean, I'd love to see it get made, but there are not any current plans to get it made, nor do I think the current regime that has been outsourced Star Trek would ever make it. Just like I figured that the Star Trek SETI Alpha 5, now it's called Star Trek SETI Alpha, that is the official title, according to CBS. It is Star Trek SETI Alpha 5. So that is the copywritten term or the title that they've gone with. So that proves to me that there is more movement than even anyone had known. Now, I'm not going to say who this person was, but last night I was contacted by somebody. Let's just say, how should I put this? I was contacted by the very highest authority when it comes to this particular project. And I'm not going to name names. And I had a multiple email exchange with this person who appreciated how effusive I was in my praise of this project, but also was dismayed at my coverage of this project, which I can understand. Again, I don't think I would have covered this if I knew this project was in production. There's other Star Trek projects that I could cover that I have not for various reasons, because they are either actively on television or in some kind of development, because it's not my desire to ruin anything for anybody. That's not what I wanted to do. If I thought this had if I thought this project was being made, I wouldn't have covered it. I thought it wasn't going to be made. However, I think we can all take, my takeaway from all of this is, I'm not necessarily saying that this is going to get made, but clearly there has been more movement on this project in various ways than have been reported. And the person that contacted me last night, for me, it was rather exciting, to be honest. But I felt a little bad, to be honest. I mean, I was having fun. I love this project, so I hope it gets made. And I hope, now that we know it's called officially Star Trek SETI Alpha 5, well, that's something I guess you could report. That's straight from CBS Legal Online Enforcement. So, yeah, and as I said, the scripts that I didn't realize that there is actually, the show has been copywritten. So maybe maybe it's in some kind of soft development state. The person I spoke to last night did not make any indication of that, but was very clear in one thing. They wanted me to say that, according to them, it was Alex Kurtzman's idea for this project to be made. Now, I also know that it was Brian Fuller's idea to attack this project as well, because there's a photograph that was taken of Brian Fuller and Nicholas Meyer the day they were discussing this project. And specifically because Brian Fuller wanted to memorialize the moment. So there's an actual photograph. I mean, it's just I must take Brian Fuller's word for it, but there is. And that was something else that I heard. So yesterday was a really interesting day. Now, here's the thing. Star Trek belongs to CBS. There is no leeway. There is no questioning whether or not Star Trek is CBS's or not. It is, 100%. There's no leeway. And, of course, I got to observe firsthand what happens when you get sued by CBS, because I was definitely an observer right on the 50-yard line of the Axanar CBS suit. So there is no question in my mind that they own it, lock, stock, and barrel. There's no question. Anything to do with Star Trek, any iconography, it's theirs. It is theirs. Now, here's the thing. If you've listened to the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, the question that I have is, when is it okay from a fan perspective, but a public perspective, or just as a documentarian or a journalist, how far back, when is it okay to cover Star Trek projects that remain unmade? No one said anything when we covered the Star Trek The Beginning script, and I would assume that was because it was Paramount's script. They were the people, it was Donald DeLine and Carey McCluggage that commissioned that script, so it had nothing to do with CBS. Now, this merger that's happening with Viacom, I know there's the bifurcation of the Star Trek film rights and the Star Trek TV rights, and everything is going through Secret Hideout now, even though CBS Legal obviously controls the franchise itself. So the question remains, are you allowed to cover these things? Obviously, the Star Trek Phase 2 series, and again, that was made by Paramount, or Philip Kaufman's aborted Planet of the Titans script that dates back to the 70s as well. Those are fair game. The Reeve Stevens wrote a terrific book on the Phase 2 television series that never was, Star Trek The Lost Years. I have that book right over there. Actually, it's Star Trek Phase 2 was what it was called, and their book. It's a wonderful book on the unmade series, Star Trek Phase 2. So, and that's obviously an officially licensed book. So now they've got Star Trek Prodigy. The director of that was just announced today. There's obviously the Section 31 show. There's the Strange New World show. Now, I don't know how far along these shows are. I'm dubious as to if any of them. Prodigy will probably get made, but whether Section 31 would ever get made or whether Strange New Worlds will get made, all of that remains to be seen. We shall see. I mean, I guess it really depends on how Star Trek Discovery Season 3 performs. Now, obviously, when something is close to coming out, it's been really interesting to see how CBS has done a lot of takedowns of Star Trek Lower Decks. People that have covered it, people that have shown any of it. And the question is, there's definitely when it comes to being a journalist and covering this material in our online world, Star Trek has probably been one of the most inconsistent franchises in terms of what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do in terms of covering the series. Now, Quentin Tarantino famously did not like it when people covered his script for The Hateful Eight. Indeed, he said that he wasn't even going to make the movie. The fact the script had gotten out, he'd said, "Oh my God, I'm not going to do it." Well, cooler heads prevailed, and he did make The Hateful Eight. As a matter of fact, not only did he make The Hateful Eight, he shot it in 70mm, and if you have Netflix, he actually recut it and turned it into a 4-part series it has more material. That's a different version of The Hateful Eight. So he got to make it twice, really. He has his original theatrical version, and then he has the 4-part version that he did for Netflix. So at first, he was afraid that the script had gotten out. But if there's one thing that I've learned in my 31 years of working in the entertainment business, that is a truism. I think that reading a screenplay for a project, I've learned this, does not ever diminish your enjoyment of the finished film. The screenplay is just that, a screenplay. A screenplay might have a line of dialogue that says, so-and-so bounds into a room, enthusiastically bounds into the room. That's how it'll read on the script. Well, how that's shot, let's say you're David Fincher, let's say you're Martin Scorsese, let's say you're Denis Villeneuve, how somebody bounds into a room, how that's shot, it's different for all three people. Now imagine that everything in a script, it's described and you might be able to see it in your mind's eye, but it is still in screenplay form. And it does not diminish your enjoyment of the finished film at all. Because, I worked in Hollywood. I read lots of scripts that eventually got made before they got made. And none of them ever diminished my enjoyment of the finished product. Now, does it tell you the twists and turns of the story? Certainly. However, when you go in and you watch a version of a screenplay, you forget all of that. And you let the movie transport you away. So I guess I've never thought, now in this day and age when you have movies like Avengers Endgame and there's all of these questions, many questions, I would not report on something like that because you don't want to diminish people's, I'm not a person that believes in spoilers. Why spoil a movie? But in the case of SETI Alpha 5, and after reading it, I didn't feel anything was really spoilery because it was, there's not any shocking revelations about the Star Trek universe. It's just a really compelling story, and we kind of know where it begins and where it winds up. So it was, and there's been other variations on this story as I reported on Greg Cox's book, The Tipton's Comics, they did for IDW. So this is a story where this ground is sort of well-trodden in other mediums. And having someone like Nicholas Meyer come back, who is writing these scripts and potentially directing the project, that was exciting. It was exciting. So I honestly felt that it wasn't going to get made. So I figured, okay, well, I'll report on it. Why not? I have the scripts. And I figured, okay, How interesting. I mean, I had the script for Star Trek The Beginning for a very long time and never was going to report on it until the Inglorious Trexperts did an episode where we interviewed Eric Jedridson, the screenwriter. And I held off on reviewing the script until the Inglorious Trexperts podcast broke so they could be together in tandem. If you wanted to listen to my script review of Star Trek The Beginning, you could, and then you could jump over to the Inglorious Trexperts podcast and listen to screenwriter Eric Jedridson talking about the development of that project and what happened. And I thought that's really interesting because, hey, Star Trek The Beginning is probably never going to get made. If I was over at Paramount right now, I would push for it to get made, but it probably isn't going to get made. So, now, as far as we all know, Star Trek SETI Alpha 5, there's no plans to make this into a show yet. But there's more movement than I thought. The fact that it is a registered trademark, there is no copyright on the actual script. Like normally when you have a script, it'll say copyright on it. This script didn't. So there was no copyright notice on it. It was just written. I mean, I have a Space 1999 script from like 20 years ago that somebody wrote. There's no copyright on that script either. And it wasn't an officially commissioned project. So anyway, but philosophically I was thinking, all right, if somebody wants to take down the stream because I'm talking about their product, I find that to be very interesting. Like, where are we in terms of our society? Like, okay, I get it. You have a project, and you could say that by speaking about a project, I get it. I'm not stupid, that it could be damaging to the product. But then I would also say we're talking about Star Trek that's been around for 54 years, which I understand. And I understand that people want to keep a lid on spoilers. It's not lost on me. Obviously, I understand the reasons why. But, again, these things do exist. And if you're talking about First Amendment rights, it was interesting that CBS mentioned things like non-disclosures. I don't have a non-disclosure. I'm not even a journalist. I'm not somebody, I'm not Access Media. I'm just somebody, a fan, a filmmaker that's talking about random stuff. And it's not even like I'm a scooper per se. The Duel of the Fates script was something interesting to talk about. This was after Rise of Skywalker came out. According to interviews, Nicholas Meyer back in 2017 said he had no idea what was going on with his project. He'd never heard back. And it certainly hasn't been reported about at all. But when you get a takedown notice, it makes me realize, okay, well, as a private citizen pontificating about something I've read, I mean, it's not a real thing yet. Yeah, it's a script that was written about Star Trek for CBS, but it's other than the screenplay. And I understand, okay, it's their screenplay, but if I'm just talking about something, it's not like I went and made the episode. So I'm curious. I haven't really explored fair use when it comes to talking about these things, but it's interesting considering how much Star Trek content is on the internet. Now, this is different in that, okay, it's a copywritten script. Well, but then again, people are talking about all kinds of, you talk about Star Trek The Wrath of Khan. If I wanted to talk about that movie, no one's going to come after me and give me a copyright strike because the movie's already out. And I get it, but there's no plans currently to make this show. So where's the demarcation point? Can I talk about it? Can I not talk about it? I mean, it exists. It hasn't been officially announced. There is no production office that's working on it that I know of. Now, to be honest, there could very well be. There could be active development on this project as we speak, and there's no reason that I would know or that you would know or that anybody would know, because there's lots of projects that aren't announced publicly until they're further along. As a matter of fact, most projects aren't. We don't hear about projects until they're more tangible, unless they're high profile. But most movies, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of movies that get made, you never hear about them because nobody cares. There's very few franchises that people care about. Star Trek, Star Wars, the MCU, Harry Potter, any superhero movies, anything that has a following, people care. But if somebody tells you that Meryl Streep is going to star in a remake or part 2 of The French Lieutenant's Woman, it's not like the online press would be clamoring to get all the details for that. I mean, I might because I like the original, but you know what I'm saying? So there's very few franchises that are getting this kind of scrutiny. And, you know, I wonder, like, all right, I'm talking about these scripts, sure, but, you know, you killed my 2-hour stream, and could you chalk that up to publicity? I mean, what's the difference between talking about something that's been made as opposed to something that hasn't been made yet? I mean, we have to keep it a secret. Well, if you reveal the details, it could be detrimental to. I don't think that there's the only thing that's detrimental to a franchise like Star Trek is when it's not good, when less people watch it because the final product isn't good. And I don't think there's anything that's demonstrable that can say that, not foreknowledge of a screenplay is going to somehow damage the actual final product. I don't know if that's ever been proven. I don't know if you could ever prove that, because I think that people are interested. No one's going to not go to see this. As a matter of fact, I would say that I was surprised at how good those scripts were actually. I mean, they were, not that I would expect anything less of Nicholas Meyer, but they were really good. And so, all right, well, you don't want me to talk about them. That's fine. So I guess I won't. But philosophically, I just find it interesting. Like, where are we going as a culture? Where are we going as a society? Where are we going to wind up? Was there demonstrable damages to be proven if you talk about something that's going to get made? I don't know. I don't think there are, especially for these franchise properties, because as many spoilers that leak online, people go, even when the spoilers are correct. It's not like it's hampering business. The reason that people even care is because how hyped they are for these things. I mean, I'll see anything that has to do with Star Trek, as much as I sometimes dread doing it lately. I didn't used to dread it, but I dreaded it. I began to dread Star Trek about 4 months before Star Trek 09 opened, when I was invited to go to Paramount to watch 20 minutes of the movie. And ever since then, I've dreaded Star Trek. I dread you, Michael. But yes, it's very interesting. So I've been grappling with it, but certainly got some interesting email last night from that was very interesting, and I certainly have been continuing to get people to reach out to me today, and it's been fun. It's also been illuminating. So I want to thank everybody for watching it. And people have asked, is this show going to go back up? Well, now that I have been officially sent an email from CBS Online, I will not be putting the show up again. I was thinking about releasing it as a podcast. I know better than to poke the bear when the bear has spoken. I've been specifically asked and told by CBS, not just by some YouTube thing, but CBS themselves reached out and told me not to talk about it, so I won't. But I will say this. You guys should make it. Come on, CBS. Why not make this? I mean, it's totally different than it's totally different than anything else. You don't have to shoot it on location somewhere, and it wouldn't be nearly as expensive as the kind of thing that you're doing now. But I think it should be done. So anyway, yeah. So check that out. That's all I have to say about that. But yes, in the future, I'll probably think twice. I won't. It's fun to talk about these things, to be honest. I mean, it's not like my channel's big enough where I'm getting hundreds of thousands of views on these things. And I'm just interested in them because of me, because of my personal interest in Star Trek. So, and as we've been covering things lately that haven't gotten made or did get made or are going to get made, it just seemed like an interesting thing that I had the scripts. They were given to me, and I was like, oh, I'm going to cover this. And yeah. By the way, I'm not sitting on any other Star Trek scripts. Star Trek: The Beginning and this. That was about it. Anyway, why haven't I shifted to my main camera? I don't know. I don't know. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to Robservations, episode 486. Let's see. I got some letters. I got some good letters, aside from CBS Legal, which is kind of cool, to be honest. The first letter I got is from our man, Donnie Pearson. Donnie Pearson says, "Hello, Rob. Well, it's been over half a year since the Walt Disney Company phased out the Fox name from 20th Century Studios and Searchlight Pictures. I was totally cool with whether Disney would rename 20th Century Fox Television or fold it into ABC Studios, but things have changed. This morning, Disney Television Studios renamed 20th Century Fox Television and ABC Studios as 20th Television. I think it's, is it 20th Television? And ABC Signature, respectively, and renamed Fox 21 Television Studios as the newly revived Touchstone Television. I'm totally fine with that. What are your thoughts on the rebranding? Thanks, and keep up the good work." Well, Donnie, what an interesting question. Yeah, I saw that today, that Disney rebranded their television division between that and all the layoffs at Warner Brothers, restructuring and all that. I think this is a good move. I mean, we all knew that the Fox name was going away. I mean, 20th Century Studios, that's what it was before it was 20th Century Fox Studios. So I think it's good. I think it's what they need to do. Now I hope that Disney will reconsider and start releasing Fox movies on 4K disc. Wouldn't that be nice? So, yeah. But I thought that was that's good. So, yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it was a good move. And it was inevitable. It was always going to happen. There was nothing they could do for that. And our friend in the UK, Emma Bannon, is back. She says, "Hi, Rob and fellow imagination connoisseurs. I wanted to write to you about my love for Star Trek and what I think of the current iteration of it." I know. Yet another letter about Star Trek. There's never too many letters about Star Trek. But I wanted to tell you about what it has meant to me and why I think that the Kurtzman-led version has caused such friction amongst fans. Charlie X. That was my introduction to Star Trek. The strange tale of a child that should not have survived alone for 14 years after a disastrous shuttle crash, and of how he wreaks havoc on board the Enterprise. It was weird and cerebral, and I'd not seen anything like it before. Although there was a modicum of action, it was mostly about Kirk and the crew's efforts to understand what was happening and attempt to control it. I'll never forget the scene where Charlie Evans removes a young ensign's face, and she stumbles into the shot, revealing a literal blank face. One of, still to this day, Emma, one of the great creepy moments in all of television history. I wanted to see more of this, and over the years I watched it on television and collected it on home media. I liked it. I liked it a lot. As a child, I was constantly bullied by my brothers. I say this not to elicit sympathy, but merely to show what drew me to Trek and what it stood for. The cinema, science fiction, and especially Star Trek was a form of escape. Worlds where the fantastical could happen, and I was safe. Then came the next generation. I'd watched it on video rentals, 2 episodes of tape released somewhat sporadically but voraciously consumed. And again, it offered a world where people were better than the one I was in, where they had learned and explored and accepted all manners of life and experiences. I remember going to my first convention, a fan-run one in Blackpool in the north of England, and being blown away by the hundreds of fans who dressed up and stayed up all night discussing their favorite episode, the guests, and to my surprise, episodes from the States that I would otherwise have waited months to see. There was a true Trek community, and it blew me away. I became fairly involved in Trek fandom, and from then on going to several conventions and even helping run one where I was responsible for the video program, and eventually writing for the official fan club magazine in the UK, mostly about the great customizable card game from Decipher that is now sadly no more. Deep Space Nine was an interesting departure of sorts for the franchise, and although it had somewhat of a rocky start and the least effective title music, it soon developed into a wonderfully powerful show. How do good people act in a war? How far do good people go when driven to desperation? I was sad to see it end, as it was the show more than any of the others that I think really delved into the psychology of how to react in morally challenging times. You know, that's probably the best example or the best indicator or of what Deep Space Nine is about. A lot of people talk about how, oh, well, Deep Space Nine completely abandoned Gene Roddenberry's philosophy of Star Trek. And I've always thought, where do you come up with that? Because the whole idea, just what Emma said, Deep Space Nine was an interesting departure of sorts for the franchise, and although it had somewhat of a rocky start and the least effective title music, it soon developed into a wonderfully powerful show. How do good people act in a war? How far do good people go when driven to desperation? I've always said similar things, and I think that's a great summation, those two sentences, of why Deep Space Nine is worthy of the name Star Trek and what makes it a great show. And people talk about In the Pale Moonlight and how, well, Ben Sisko, he's condoning murder. I can live with it. And the whole point is that, no, he really can't. And he's trying to convince himself of this, and that's why he erases his log at the end. He will be haunted by it for the rest of his life. But the fact is, he didn't ask for this war. He didn't plunge the entire Alpha Quadrant into a war with the Dominion. And he needed what he needed to do. He needed to do what he needed to do to save billions of lives. Just because you live and you're from a utopia, you live in and you're from a utopia, doesn't mean that when war breaks out, everything is hunky-dory for you. That's when the going gets tough, and you really have to start wondering, well, what can I do to prevent, further bloodshed? And I thought that Deep Space Nine did a great job with that. I was sad to see it go, as it was this show, more than any others, that I think delved into the psychology of how to react in morally challenging times. Absolutely. Although I found both Voyager and Enterprise uneven in their success, they both still had moments of what Star Trek stood for. The addition of Seven was something of a missed opportunity. I wish that they had tackled that character a little more, like the liberated female Borg in Peter David's book Vendetta, but still, she wasn't bad. The movies, too, to a great extent, carried on my love for the show. I love the motion picture, even if it did remind me of the classic episode The Changeling, and the trilogy of Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, and Voyage Home. So in 2009, when they rebooted Star Trek, for want of a better word, my hopes were high. The first movie was okay. Lots of lens flares, lots of explosions, but I got that to make an impact, they had to get people's attention. But the other movies wouldn't be like this, except they were. It was all about spectacle. The Wrath of Sherlock's story, Into Darkness, didn't make sense to me. Transporters that could propel someone across the galaxy, why bother with ships at all? And for some bizarre reason, Khan's name being changed to John Harrison? I get the script idea for drama, but in terms of coherent plot, it made no sense. Beyond 2 was a disappointment, and at that point, I really had lost faith in this new incarnation of Star Trek. It's here that I think the difference between pre-Kurtzman Trek and what has been brought to our screen since really comes into focus. Now, I'm absolutely not denigrating anyone who loves the modern movies, Discovery or Picard. I can't comment on Lower Decks as I've yet to see it. If you watch these shows, enjoy them, and look forward to each new episode, well, that's great. And I get how tiresome it can be when you feel that people are constantly critiquing something you love. I get that. Having said that, I think criticism, discussion, debate shouldn't be something we should avoid or be afraid of. As long as it's not personal attacks and is well-reasoned, it shows the health of any fandom. One of the things I loved about attending conventions was arguing about which episode was better or who my favorite character was, or 101 other things. It was never personal, it was engaging. It was part of the lifeblood of the event. Discovery to me is not Star Trek, and to be honest, I don't think it's even particularly good drama. Sure, it looks great, but it's kind of like a beautifully wrapped present that once you open, you find, well, nothing inside. To give it its due, the gay relationship on the show is handled well. There's no big issue or drama, simply two people who love each other. But that's the only aspect of it that I can truly praise. There's a complete disregard for canon, and instead of getting people who know the history of the show to advise and help avoid any huge howlers or work hard to right the ship, their solution to complaints? Move the ship hundreds of years into the future and get everyone to promise to never talk about it. They did that on the show. So, really? That's their solution? Now, I realize that if you slavishly follow canon, it might prevent some really interesting and entertaining stories. But if you want those stories told, make sure they're told with imagination and some intelligence rather than just a metaphorical shrug of the shoulders. The first season Klingons look very peculiar. all bald for some weird reason, and although they were refined of sorts in the second season, they never recovered. The spore drive, black alert, no lights on the ship, all these new aesthetics never work. I get the show wanted its own identity, but the way in which it attempted to do this was so badly handled and poorly thought out, if at all. However, the number one thing were the characters. Star Trek's success has never been about spectacle, never about huge battles. Sure, in previous series you had those, and they were entertaining and gripping because there was an emotional context to them. You cared about what happened to the crew because there was depth to them and their relationships to each other. Yesterday's Enterprise worked because Tasha Yar was fated to die and she was given another chance. What would she do? The search for Spock involved the destruction of the Enterprise and of an entire planet, but it worked because these people were all doing this facing death in the hope of saving their friend. To me, what drove me to Star Trek and what made me keep watching was what the show stood for. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. It didn't matter what the color of your skin was, your gender, your sexuality, your religion. Heck, it didn't matter if you were based on carbon or silicon. Each race, each person was afforded the same respect and opportunities as everyone else, and it didn't mean that society was homogenized or forced to act in a certain way even. It meant that there was a respect for all living things, and the United Federation of Planets was the epitome of that. This was the show's soul. With Kurtzman Trek, this doesn't seem to be any part of the show. Maybe this will change with Discovery Season 3 and Picard Season 2, but I'm not holding my breath. Both series are about cool moments, with little to no foreshadowing or explanation as to why these cool moments are actually happening. Discovery's production values are high. The ship, when someone bothers to turn the lights on, looks all flashy and high-tech, but it's soulless. It reminds me of Scott's line from the TNG episode Relics. When I was here, you could tell the speed that we were traveling by the feel of the deck plates. The Enterprise was almost a character in itself. In Discovery, it's just a high-tech set. In Picard, though, there's a far worse sin. The character assassination of the titular captain. Now, I understand that as an actor, Patrick Stewart does not want to play the same character in the same situations. That would be artistically redundant for him, but the direction, or should that be the directions, Picard went in was inconsistent with what had gone before, and the decisions he made puzzling at best. He's on this desperate mission to save Soji, so what does he do? Stops off at a planet and picks up a companion who is so important that later on he manages to leave him on a Borg ship and not seem bothered in the slightest that this man has been abandoned? He walks into a bar and deliberately picks a fight with a refugee for no reason other than so that Space Legolas can behead him? He kills Data and at the same time does not have much of a problem with one of his crew murdering Bruce Maddox? These are things that the Picard from the TV series and movies would have been appalled by, and here, well, there's never any justification as to why he acts this way. Even if there had been some great trauma, and I'm not counting his walking away from Starfleet, there's never anything that explores the true impact that it had on him and drove him to be a completely different person. It's almost as if the writers didn't watch Star Trek, were not bothered that they hadn't watched Trek, and just thought, wouldn't it be cool if? Now, for a lot of people, they don't care about these things. They watch the shows and enjoy them. They like the spectacle. They're not tied to canon and find the characters compelling. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But for me, they are hollow shells of what the show used to be. They are shows that does not understand nor care for its own history, that puts its strength not on characters or challenging episodes that tackled weighty issues, but in moments. There's nothing there that gets me excited or involved with either the characters or the tortuously convoluted plot. A plot, by the way, that does not make up its mind as to where it's going from episode to episode. When I think of past Star Trek, I think of episodes like Devil in the Dark, The Offspring, and The Visitor. Kurtzman Trek has not produced anything, at least for me, that comes close to making me feel and think the way these episodes did. That's why, to me at least, this really isn't Star Trek at all. And I will always wish for a return to the halcyon days of when Star Trek meant something other than viewing figures for a streaming service. That is from Emma Bannon. And what a great work. What a great letter. Thank you, Emma. And I of course, I agree with everything you've said there. Yeah, I don't understand. There's not one. If you ask somebody, name a good episode of Star Trek Discovery or Picard. I mean, even the end of Discovery, when they're having a battle, they're in a circle shooting each other. I'm like, what? It's so strange. It's as if no one there has ever watched science fiction or read science fiction or anything. So I don't disagree with you at all. So Yeah, I'm with you. 100%. And, I can't read that one. But anyway, let's see what you guys are saying. What are you all saying? I don't know. And that's why I'm going to find out what you are saying. Actually, you know what? I got one more I want to read first. This is a good letter. This one comes from Joey Koch. Joey Koch writes in and says, "Hey Rob, I've become enchanted by a film I've viewed recently. One I don't believe I've heard you mention this film, but I assume that you have seen it based on your hyper awareness of horror films. It's called Hagazusa, which is an old German language word for witch. Now, calling it a witch movie is a mild spoiler. There's no obvious exposition given to the viewers by the filmmaker that the main character, Albrun, is a witch. Although in the beginning of the story, her mother, Martha, is threatened by some villagers claiming she is a witch years prior to the main story. We mostly observe Albrun grinding through her lonely days in the beautiful yet spooky setting of the 15th century Austrian Alps. She lives, not deliciously, in an isolated hut a couple of thousand feet above the valley, and it seems that the existence is fine with her as she tends to her babies and her goats, her baby and her goats, but the villagers just don't stop trying to fuck with her. They're not comfortable that she is not a Christian, but they are way out of their league when they simply brand her as a heathen. There are many very disturbing scenes in this film. I have not seen this film, and I don't know this film, though some more graphic than others. There's bestiality, child molestation, cannibalism, infanticide, psychedelic mushroom freakouts, rapes, goat gore, retching, body horror, and ossuary, creepy black-coated people that cart lye-covered bodies to burn piles, maggot close-ups, super fucking gnarly horror, some of which is presented as unceremonious pieces to a ritual puzzle. VFX are limited to some pretty brief, scary hallucinations, but instead the filmmaker uses close-ups of the shadowy environment, even fractal patterns of the baby ferns growing in the forest, to create an expressionistic environment. Albrun whispers to herself at times, completely unintelligible to us viewers, but we're allowed inside Albrun at times. Altered frame rates bring down the pace, and we hear her breathing slowed down as she seems to transcend to an alternate plane. Again, not once are we given any consorting with the devil's speeches or any exposition explaining away this world. A masturbation scene was cut like this. Albrun lying face down in bed, pretty tight framing, waist up, covered by goat skin. Hand sinks below the covers and she goes to town. Cutaway shot of a goat skull decoration on the wall above the bed, followed by another shot of the fire and the hearth burning fiercely. Cue weird sound. Cut back to Albrun. Hand reappears above bed covers as her body is, or is seemingly being violently rammed, pun intended, from behind. Climax done. Incubus, masturbation, incubation, perhaps unseen forces are hidden in plain sight. The sound mix is awesome too. Inside of the thick-walled wood hut, the sound effects are deep and rich. Pretty minimally used, but when there was a sudden pounding on the hut or when one of the characters bellows in pain, it's super effective. Anyway, there's way more to this amazing German language 2017 film, but that's probably all I should write about it. I hope it's not too spoilery. I was just so impressed by this super fine horror movie, and I really can't stop thinking about it. I'm going to have to run this one by Dieter. Hagazusa. Hagazusa. What a cool name. I would watch that. Also, and most serendipitously, I followed your endorsement and watched The Love Witch. I found it available. It's Anna Biller's movie. Anna Biller is a female filmmaker who made this throwback to Euro horror of the 70s, I guess late 60s and 70s. I really liked it. I bought the Blu-ray, and I thought she absolutely succeeded in what she was trying to do. I found it available on one of my subscriptions, gave it a watch, and really enjoyed it. Fun, I'd say. Wasn't really expecting such a retro-styled black magic rom-com. Also, getting schooled and reminded of the divine feminine energies is always a welcome refresher course. Very pretty film, some genuine laughs, and I'm totally familiar with the filming locations of Arcata and Eureka up here in Northern California. Humanoids from the Deep was filmed up around these parts as well. I love Humanoids from the Deep. Have visited a few apothecary shops along the North Coast, too, so lots of verisimilitude. Viceroy, I do have a thing for occult films, the art direction and the ritual scenes. Very intriguing stuff. Pentagrams, nude bodies, daggers, metal cups. rewatched The Devil's Reign recently and got such a kick out of the scenes with Ernest Borgnine cloaked in a crimson robe leading the Black Mass ceremony. Anyway, Rob, stay rad and keep up the good work. Love what you're doing, Joey Koch. Joey, I have to tell you, I love satanic worshiping movies. I mean, I'll flat out say it. I love cultists. I love Satan worshipers. I love Black Phillip. Anything to do with somebody trying to unleash the evil dark forces. To me, I love all that stuff. I love all that stuff. It's so much fun. That's why I like, movies like even The Ninth Gate. It's good stuff. I'm glad you had a good time with those movies. And, The Love Witch, Anna Biller, a great female filmmaker. Why not support her work? So let's see what you are saying. Let me jump over here and go down and see what's going on with people. Oh, Raygun Media is here. Raygun Media says, so Paul Jenkins just left the Axanar Project. Yes, for those of you who don't know, the third director for Axanar, Paul Jenkins, who wrote like The Inhumans and Old Man Logan for Marvel, he was the third director after me on the Axanar Project, and he departed. He put out a press release over the weekend and explained why he was leaving, a lack of transparency, amongst other things, and he was concerned with the finances of the project. It sounds to me like nothing has changed on the Axanar Project. I wouldn't be surprised if Alec Peters now declares himself the director of the project, because after all, while he was preparing his Battlestar Galactica auction, he was on set, so I'm sure that he learned from his time on set as much as he needs to know about making films. So, yep, it's kind of a bummer. I'm sorry that Paul Jenkins and Gary Graham left. I was really happy to work with Gary Graham on the Vulcan scene. And again, I think Prelude to Axanar is a terrific piece of work, and I was really happy to be involved with that project. Senor Ashish is here and says, with box office revenue down and some theaters possibly folding, will this change the mega budget business model in Hollywood and cause studios to be more frugal with their budgets? Can a $50 to $90 million Star Trek film revival be on the horizon? Well, look, in terms of Star Trek, Scott Mendelson, who I have a love-hate relationship with his opinions, Scott Mendelson over in Forbes. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna go get that right now, because I was gonna read this article, but you know what? I'm gonna read this article since you brought it up, because I think this article is actually really, really great. And if you guys haven't seen it, I am absolutely going. I'll read it because let me pull it up here so you can actually see the article. Because this article is absolutely correct, and everything about it is in fact true. So let me get this here. Let me put it up. So here is the article, and let's journey into it together. So this article, Scott Mendelson wrote this article, and it was on the 8th. How Paramount failed to turn a Star Trek into a blockbuster franchise. Now, this letter, I read this article. This goes out to everybody that always tells me, what, the new Star Trek movies were a big success. They were not. They were not a big success. They did not earn out. Paramount's experiment to turn Star Trek into an A-level blockbuster franchise was a resounding failure, and it's no more likely to succeed in today's unforgiving theatrical marketplace. It has been just over 4 years since Star Trek Beyond bombed in global theatrical release, earning solid reviews and decent buzz, but just $158 million domestic and $338 million worldwide on a $185 million budget. Since then, we've seen stops and starts, false alarms, and related developments concerning where the franchise might go next. But as we find out that new Paramount film chief Emma Watts, who left Fox after the Disney sale, is attempting to figure out where to go from here, it's time to admit that, in the broad scheme of things, Paramount's attempts to make Star Trek into a blockbuster movie franchise was a failure. What was feared in 2008 and was confirmed in 2013 remains even truer in 2020 and beyond. Star Trek is never going to be a top-tier global box office powerhouse. There are currently 3 different Star Trek movies in some form of development at Paramount, We've got a straight-up Star Trek 4, which will presumably reunite the Bad Robot cast, Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, Zoe Saldana, John Cho, and Simon Pegg, and possibly bring back Chris Hemsworth as Kirk's late father. That one stalled when Pine and Hemsworth held out for the paycheck, which was promised before Star Trek Beyond bombed. $338 million on $185 million budget. We've got the Noah Hawley directed flick, which is little is known beyond the plot, allegedly concerning a virus wiping out much of the universe, which might not play very well at the present time or ever within the optimistic Star Trek mythology. And we have Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek film, which may involve 1930s gangster tropes. Sounds like it's going to be a sequel to A Piece of the Action. One of the first posts I ever wrote on my personal blog was one questioning why Paramount was spending $150 million on a Star Trek reboot, considering no Star Trek movie had ever earned more than $109 million in unadjusted domestic grosses. Sure, the brand has proven its worth on television, while the feature films have been reliable movers in the post-theatrical afterlife. It still seemed a huge risk to spend Transformers money on a franchise that was proven to be a comparatively... I didn't mean to do that. Comparatively small-scale theatrical performer. Star Trek the Motion Picture and Star Trek the Wrath of Khan both broke the opening weekend box office record in 1979 for $11 million and 1982 $14 million, but the films had generally stalled out at under $75 million domestic, even as the budgets for the sequels went up. The motion picture earned $82 million domestic, while The Voyage Home, a newbie-friendly comedy that set the Enterprise crew back to 1987, earned $109 million. First Contact, a PG-13, shocking at the time, an action-driven thriller involving Picard facing off against the Borg, opened with $30 million, a record for Star Trek at the time, and ended with $90 million domestic on a $45 million budget. 2 entries later, the also PG-13 and action-powered Nemesis would earn lousy reviews and outright bomb, earning $43 million domestic and $67 million worldwide on a $60 million budget. Yet now, 7 years later, Paramount would spend $150 million on a reboot for a franchise whose biggest global entry, First Contact, had earned $150 million. Even Star Trek the Motion Picture earned just $139 million global on a then huge $35 million budget. J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, starring sexy, cool young actors as the marquee characters from the original show and first 6 movies, opened in May of 2009 amid rave reviews and white-hot buzz with $79 million. It legged out to $256 million domestic, which is, even adjusted for inflation, the biggest Trek haul, $313 million adjusted versus $298 million for the motion picture, for a Star Trek movie. The film still earned only $385 million worldwide, again showing the franchise's weak drawing power outside of North America. But that was okay because everyone likes Star Trek, and surely the sequel was going to break out here, right? Well, in retrospect, Batman Begins, which made $205 million domestic and $371 million worldwide on a $150 budget, leading to The Dark Knight, $533 million or $1.4 billion, gave false hope to the next generation of franchise relaunches. At least part of the appeal of Star Trek, was that Star Trek gave audiences the kind of high-flying sci-fi swashbuckler thrills that many felt they didn't get from George Lucas's Star Wars prequels or, relatively speaking, Steven Spielberg's Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This was 4 years after Revenge of the Sith, and there was no reason to assume that there'd ever be more Star Wars movies. Moreover, Star Trek was one of the biggest in terms of size, scale, and fantastical ambition movies of that year, behind only Paramount's own Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, which had earned $409 million domestic and $867 million that same summer. The previous year's Iron Man was a comparatively small-scale action flick that had earned just $185 million worldwide, while The Incredible Hulk outright bombed. In 2009, Star Trek was the closest thing to Star Wars and one of the biggest franchises in size and scale. But by 2013, when Star Trek Into Darkness opened to mostly positive reviews, the MCU was on the verge of upping the scale of even their non-Avengers movies, while The Fast and the Furious had become an A-level action ensemble franchise. With Disney buying Lucasfilm in late 2012, we were on the verge of getting a sequel to Return of the Jedi featuring Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford, reprising their marquee roles. Audiences now had Fast and Furious and Avengers and Michael Bay's ridiculously huge Transformers movies. Oh, and the Jedi were about to return. Star Trek Into Darkness earned $228 million domestic, and thanks to a 3D conversion, $467 million worldwide on a $190 million budget. That wasn't big enough considering the budget, and it wasn't remotely the level of breakout sequel that Paramount was hoping for after Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest, from $654 million in 2003 to $1.06 billion in 2006. The Dark Knight, $371 million in 2005 to $1.0004 billion in 2008, and Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, $708 million in 2007, $836 million in 2009. That 18% jump for Transformers 2 was smaller than the 21% jump for Star Trek Into Darkness, but Transformers earned $708 million on a $150 million budget. The base series also jumped 33% domestically between installments, and the third film, the first in 3D, would top $1 billion in 2011. Iron Man 3, opening just before Star Trek Into Darkness, doubled the global gross of Iron Man 2, $623 million in 2010 and $1.215 billion in 2013. 3 years later, Star Trek Beyond would open amid a summer of once-were-giant franchise relaunches. Independence Day, Jason Bourne, Ghostbusters, Answer the Call, X-Men Apocalypse, Alice Through the Looking Glass, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows. In a world where The Fast and the Furious delivered a diverse and eclectic ensemble hero cast, fighting the good fight, Star Wars The Force Awakens and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy both offered swashbuckling sci-fi adventure, and the MCU had upped the scale to the point where Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War were some of the biggest movies around. Star Trek Beyond had no unique commercial value beyond, hey, it's another Star Trek movie. It would earn just $158 million domestic and $338 million on a still too expensive $185 million budget. The Star Trek blockbuster experiment failed. Star Trek Discovery, Picard, and the recently launched animated Lower Decks are keeping the IP alive on TV. Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, pitched as Family Guy meets Star Trek, quickly became a sincere heir to the throne, especially for those who want their Star Trek to have more optimistic exploration and sci-fi adventure and less dark conspiracies and blockbuster action. Maybe cheaper Star Trek movies, films that could be successes at $300 million worldwide, could work. What was true in 2009 is even now more true today, as the very idea of theatrical exhibition is in peril. The experiment of Bad Robot and Paramount's initial Star Trek relaunch was a failure. Could spending A-level blockbuster bucks and offering A-level blockbuster thrills turn Star Trek into an A-level blockbuster franchise? The answer, 3 times in a row, was no. So, there you go. I mean, everybody's always trying to tell me about how successful the new Star Trek movies were. They were not, as Scott Mendelson so graphically illustrated. So, Senior Ashish, no. Could a $50 to $90 million Star Trek film revival be on the horizon? That's what you asked. I would hope so. But on TV, Picard and Star Trek Discovery are some of the most expensive television ever produced. I don't know if anybody has it in them to be able to produce a Star Trek movie for a cost, for a price. And I do think it was a big mistake. I mean, if you look at what we covered with Star Trek The Beginning, if they had gone with that script instead of Bad Robot Star Trek '09 and actually extended the franchise, introducing a bunch of new exciting young characters into a situation where you didn't have to know Star Trek canon, yet it had such canonical fealty, it would have surprised and I think benefited everybody. But unfortunately, a studio regime change killed that idea, although it could still happen. Willow is here. Willow says, sorry to see that your video yesterday got taken down. I'm not familiar with the YouTube policies, but I hope that your channel isn't in danger after the copyright strikes from this and the Dune script. Well, for the Dune script, they actually struck my channel, and they did that. They didn't do that at first. They struck the video, and I republished it. And I had a copyright notice, but then when I put it up again, I downloaded it again and put it up again, then they struck my channel. Because, well, I get it. They're covering they're protecting their asset. That's the way they see it. And I was being a little cheeky. I knew what I was doing, downloading the video and then putting it up again. I pissed them off. But on the other hand, you know, it's not like Dune. I find it interesting that Dune is Dune. They adapted the book. And it's very faithful. So it's not like it was made out of whole cloth. And who knows? I can't wait for Dune. I don't think anybody who's a science fiction fan can wait for Dune. So, hey, pretty cool. Royce Freeman sent in. So, by the way, Willow, there's no my channel is not under any fear of going away because I didn't get a copyright strike. So there you go. Royce Freeman sends in a super chat and says, since J.J. Abrams wrote the Superman script in the past, what do you think the chances are he borrows elements from it if he does a new Superman? Well, I think he might. I mean, there was one thing in that script that I really liked in Flyby that I've told you guys on like I loved when Superman is fighting Tyzor, the Kryptonian that comes to Earth, basically another Zod. When they're battling with their heat visions in the middle of this city, like they're in sort of a park that's in the middle of Metropolis, and they're straining, they're walking toward one another as their heat visions blasting away, and it's ongoing. It's not just a blast. Their heat vision doesn't turn off, and they're fighting, and it's so hot that the buildings around them, the skyscrapers, literally start melting and crushing in. It's awesome. I'd love to see that, but then people would go, oh my God, how many civilians died in that scene? Oh my God, Superman's not worried about... Anyway, that's, whatever. It's a cool scene. I always liked it. Julius Goodwin says in a tip and says, to paraphrase an old song, sir, you fought the law and the law won. It's true. They did win. Picard Sucks sends in a super chat. Thank you, Picard Sucks. I appreciate that. Julius goes on to say, I'll admit, sir, the letter from CBS has to be the most courteous way of saying, take down this video or we'll legally put our foot up your ass right before we rip your head off, set your corpse on fire, then spit on it to put it out. It was very courteous. And look, I worked for CBS for 3 years. And I just think that, it's very strange that you had one of the most loyal fan bases of any franchise ever that has been completely split apart by the very product that it's by Star Trek itself. And it's kind of odd. It's a strange thing. And for me, it's odd for me to think that this franchise has meant so much to me my whole life, Star Trek, how I hate it all. Like I never would have thought that I would have hated modern Star Trek as much as I hate Star Trek Discovery and Star Trek Picard. It's very odd to me. And I'm like, how did that happen? Especially because, I've talked about this before. Like David Mack, the Star Trek novelist, who completely understands Star Trek. And if you read any David Mack Star Trek novel, if you read his Mirror Universe duology or his trilogy, the Star Trek Destiny trilogy, or the stuff he did for Star Trek Vanguard, when you read his work, you're like, this guy gets it. This guy totally understands Star Trek. He understands it backwards and forwards. And yet, on something like Star Trek Lower Decks, he's just a consultant. It's such a strange thing to me. I mean, people that are writing, there's all of these great Star Trek stories that are in books and in comics, and yet there's nobody is willing to go, because they don't want to give it up. They don't want to give up and go, well, if we use a comic, we're going to have to pay another writer. So, in the long run, if you made Star Trek great, then it would take care of itself. But unfortunately, they'll never do that because Star Trek has been outsourced to one company. Jamie Cruz sends in a tip and says, earlier you and John were discussing movie studios wanting to bypass the middleman, theaters. So I guess they want to be in the TV business instead of the movie business. Ha. 2, CBS might be upset since we mentioned the low esteem we have for them. Yeah, I don't think I think they went after me because, look, if they have plans of making Star Trek SETI Alpha 5, I get it. I understand. And it's not lost on me. If they want to make it, they want to go make it. But then I'm like, so make it. But obviously there's other things that economic reasons they can't, but yeah. Jason S. sends in a tip and says, whether a copyrighted work is published or not, that doesn't change the copyright laws. What CBS is essentially saying is that it would be a copyright violation to review and talk about one of their movies or TV shows. CBS is wrong on copyright law. Well, Jason, I think you are right about that, but here's the thing. In their mind, and this could be, you could go to court and maybe demonstrably prove this, although I don't think you could, they're saying that for me talking about this project, it is causing irrevocable damage to this project. Because that's, if you're going to sue somebody, or it's all about damage, and damages that you can prove. Now, I beg to differ. I think that if Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 was made, and by the way, we have to call it that because CBS has officially, I guess I can say that's breaking news. It is officially called Star Trek SETI Alpha 5. And remember that. So if anybody's going to report this, Star Trek SETI Alpha 5 is apparently a real thing. It's a real thing that CBS Legal will defend. So I guess, it's in active development. Obviously, it has scripts, 3 scripts. But I think that's good. But yeah, I think that's what they're worried about. And CBS is, you can talk about anything you want. And they're saying that, okay, this is proprietary information. And indeed it is. But, and I don't know if we were in a court of law, if they would prevail. But, if they'd, it's not my desire to be like, hey, I've got a scoop. I thought it was dead. I didn't think that it was moving forward. And I'm like, it should move forward. I just didn't know if it was going to. Midnight's Edge After Dark is here. Hello, Midnight's Edge After Dark. Midnight's Edge After Dark says, you're awesome, and just send in a super chat. Well, thank you very much. Jason S. says, what's going on is CBS doesn't want you talking about those scripts, and so they're lying to you and YouTube by shutting down your broadcast using the false claim that you are violating their copyright. Other companies do this to shut down their critics. Oh, I agree. It's not a copyright violation or whatever. Maybe they can say that by talking about it, but I don't think it is. How have I? All I was doing was talking about it. Hagazusa, Attic Hatch Sound is here. Hagazusa is free on Prime. Ooh, I'm gonna watch it. Creepingly slow and creepy. Anything that's creepingly slow and creepy sounds like something that I would want to read. So count me in for creepingly slow and creepy. 'Cause why not? Again, that sounds amazing. Creepingly slow and creepy. I like that. Actually, they also sent me another one. But it's the same one. They actually sent it to me twice. There you go. So I got another one from CBS. I was hoping it'd be something new. Look, the episode's gone. What can I say? I did save it though, so I do have a copy of it. But I don't want to piss anybody off. It's not like something that I don't want to get. I don't want to get into some big fight with CBS. I've been there and done that. Yeah. Omar94 wrote a letter. Hi, Rob. There is so much crap today about political correctness and being woke when it comes to entertainment. I always thought that was just happening with movies now, and older movies are being criticized instead of before. However, I realized that wasn't the case. I was reading about movies, how in 1992, 1992, both Basic Instinct and Batman Returns received a lot of controversy. Basic Instinct got backlash because of the violence, sex, and nudity, as well as the gay rights activists complaining about the portrayal of LGBT characters. Batman Returns got backlash because it was believed the violence and sexual references were deemed inappropriate for kids. I don't know why some people refuse to understand movies are fiction and do not represent reality. For example, I understand people found Basic Instinct too violent and had too much sex, but it did have an R rating, so I don't see why people still complained about it if the age rating clearly represented what is in the movie. Thanks, and bring on the filthy. Well, I when I went and saw Basic Instinct, I saw it at the UA Theater in Westwood, and there were protests outside of the theater. And it was LGBT activists. And I think, look, I think that they had a point, and their point was that, oh, you're going to portray this bisexual woman and a gay woman, and the gay woman is going to wind up being a killer, and the bisexual woman is this manipulative, satanic-like character that's Machiavellian and kills people. So the idea is that LGBTQ people are psychotic killers or Machiavellian psychotic killers. Either way, you've got two LGBTQ people. You have one lesbian character and one bisexual character who are portrayed as not being good people. Now, my problem with that is, on one hand, I would say, okay, I see what you're saying there. But in the case of Catherine Trammell is using her sexuality as a means to an end. She's using it. She knows she's beautiful. She's game to do anything. So she uses her sex appeal as a tool in her arsenal. And if you listen to what Paul Verhoeven said on some of the audio commentaries and interviews, especially on the Laserdisc, Paul Verhoeven straight up said that Catherine Trammell is the devil. That he approached her character and what he was doing in the movie is that, she's Mephistopheles, she's Lucifer, whatever you want to call her. She's the devil. And so she uses sexuality basically to destroy people's souls. And I like that idea. I like that the way he approached it is that she's literally demonic. So, you can't take it personally that she's appealing to both sexes, to use them both. And in Roxy's case, Roxy was a hugely damaged individual, and she too has been ensorcelled by the devil. I don't think Roxy necessarily, she's tough as nails, Leilani Sorrell's Roxy, but I don't necessarily think that she would be the way she is if she had not encountered Catherine Trammell. I mean, maybe she would be, but I don't think so. But yeah, I always thought, I get it. I get why people protested and you want proper portrayal of whatever subgroup you're a part of. If people aren't being portrayed correctly, well, then I can understand that being a point of concern. But, when I see a movie about a straight killer, I've never once considered protesting because a maniacal serial killer is usually a white man in his 30s. It's just the way it is. I've never felt the need to protest a film. It's fiction. But I get where they were coming from. And I did talk to some of the activists that were there. But the thing that I didn't like was they hadn't seen the movie. And the same thing happened when Friedkin was making Cruising in New York. There were people that came out and knew what it was about, thought it was going to be very disparaging, and would protest by making noise during the filming of the movie. So, yeah, it's I get it. Portrayals of people are... See, I look at it this way. Human beings are... It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what subset of people you belong to. It doesn't matter how you identify. There are some motherfuckers on this planet that are evil fucks. And some of them belong to one group or another group. No one is spared. And there's certainly been many, many movies about white dude killers as there were about bisexual or lesbian killers. It's not the first... It's not the first. Catherine Trammell uses her sexuality as a tool. And I don't think it's definitely... A smart person would not be like, this movie is condemning all gay people or all bisexual people. It is not. It is about those people in that movie. And those people clearly do not represent an entire group of people. It's just the characters in the film. And it's heightened reality and all of that. But yeah, it's interesting. It was interesting going there and I'm like, this is what you're going to protest? But I get it. Representation's important. Brian Lewandowski. Brian Lewandowski sends in a super chat and says, any possibility of a DS9 and Voyager remaster, what it would take to make it happen? Well, I've been interviewed about this a lot. The remaster of Star Trek The Next Generation took 4 years, and it took close to $15 million. Both Voyager and Deep Space Nine would require more money because they have to rebuild and rejigger the CG that they used. And it would probably and the original footage was not as well kept as Next Generation. And it would take 4 years for each show and probably between $15 and $20 million to do it correctly. So unless someone's going to shell out and then you've got a whole team that you're going to build, it's probably not going to happen, unfortunately, which is... it's a bummer. It is a bummer that it isn't happening. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 486 tonight. Elizabeth and I are going on whining about movies, and we are watching the recent film, A Good Woman is Hard to Find, that Dieter Bastian sent to me. I've never seen it. I've only seen the trailer. Go watch the trailer. It looks very intriguing. A Good Woman is Hard to Find tonight on Whining About Movies. It's a movie I don't think anyone has seen. Even we haven't. So it'll be interesting to see. Join us at 7 o'clock tonight for A Good Woman is Hard to Find. I want to thank my moderating staff. I want to thank Mike Bodden. I want to thank Greg Smith. I want to thank Mr. Derringer. I want to thank Joshua Levesque. I want to thank The Richard, who's here today. Robert Pariso. They're not here, but I want to thank them anyway. And, of course, The Richard for doing his Zoom parties and watch parties over on the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook page and on the Whining About Movies page. So thank you for that and all the work that you do. I also want to thank, that person knows who they are, but I want to thank the person who emailed me yesterday in regards to yesterday's show. That was pretty much a thrill. So certainly a thrill for me. And that we had a dialogue that went back and forth for a little while. I really like that. Now, I've met this person before. I've actually shared a stage with this person, but it was still very interesting to have somebody reach out to me and talk to this person who had a lot to say about my show yesterday. So thank you again, without using names. But anyway, there you go. So I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel, and I want to thank everybody for being an imagination connoisseur, and I want to thank everyone for their letters. The website that got obliterated is being rebuilt. Mike Bodden's doing a great job. You can now reach me. If you want to write a letter to the show, you can. rmb@theburnettwork.net. rmb@theburnettwork.net. Send me letters, send me videos. I also want to remind all of you that Patrick Keller and Dieter Bastian, all the way from Germany, our very own German godfather, he and Patrick made their short film, The Secret Exchange, and it's on the Burnettwork website, or on the YouTube page. Go check it out, because that was a lot of fun. What a fun afternoon they must have spent making that. So thank you to them for that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you imagination connoisseurs, have a better day.